So a little housekeeping, find out how everybody's doing, and then launch into some practice, and then some new material and some more practice, and then we, I think, should be in good shape with respect to the schedule. Okay, sorry, I'm just looking at the schedule while I'm saying that. All right, so pages, where's our classroom? I'm going to log in to our classroom from my tablet. Okay, and that way we've got, I'll be able to share my whiteboard and as we're working. So so a couple things on the housekeeping front. One is I went through exam 2 and sorted out the extra credit points. Right. Remember that some of the exercises in exam 2 or extra credit, but because of the way Canvas works exercises, you can't denote extra credit and have the system call it that, right? Or have the, sorry, rephrase, have the system understand that and add, calculate scores accordingly. So I went through and did that. Do me a huge favor though, and look at your score, the breakdown, make sure that I've done things correctly. If I made a mistake, I want to correct it. I haven't done the same for exam 1. I think there's some extra credit there, but I'll double check. And I also haven't done the same for, I think there were a couple of quizzes that involve extra credit. So I'll get all that done. The other bit of housekeeping is this. If you look at our home page, so let me come back. If you go to our home page, and you, where's the, okay, I put it in student view so that it's, oh wait, I didn't share my screen with you. Hold on. Okay, sorry, now I've shared my screen. And I also see Berman, I think you had a question. So let me find it. Hold on. Berman, I just joined. I heard the magic words extra credit. Yeah. Berman, remind me. I'll just repeat what I said. But remind me to do that. In the meantime, yes, I was talking a little bit about extra credit that I had owed you. In the meantime, though, if we look at our homepage, our Canvas homepage, and we scroll down to the module handouts, additional practice, and retests, you'll see retests for both exam 1 and exam 2. And it should be the case that I've worked the points so that, and if I didn't, I'll fix this, but I worked the points so that they're commensurate with, the total possible for each of the original exams. And then also I think I shared this with you last week, but if I didn't, let me know. It's the rule sheet for our Boolean Connectives. So it's taking a little bit to load. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I shared this with you last week, right? So you definitely want to use that. I will add a new rule sheet once we get to the material in chapters basic, it should be 18. 18 is the rules for the conditional and the biconditional, which we're going to talk about this week. So there'll be an updated rule sheet for that. I'll also give you a proof strategy sheet. I should have already posted that. I don't know why I didn't. But let's go back out to the home page. The other item that might be of use to you is the additional practice link. So there are some additional proof completion and proof construction and completion practice, and then keys for a key for each. I wrote some or both of these documents using the draw feature on my tablet. I'll show you what I mean by that. Just because it's faster than converting some Word documents that are typed using other notation. If you have any trouble reading any of these, just let me know. Okay. But so the idea is that there's additional practice for the Boolean proof material. If you want more practice, just let me know. In fact, I'll be posting more, some additional practice having to do with the remaining chapters, and that'll come as we're working on it. Okay, so that's it for my housekeeping stuff. Do you have any questions, problems, confusions that you want to get to?
Are we going over like chapter 7 today with the conditionals and biconditionals?
Yeah, Julianne. So what our goal today is to talk about the propositional logic connectives, the conditional and the biconditional, and work on not just the symbolization, but also the truth definitions, translations. We'll probably work translations first. And then after that, if folks want to do some more work in the previous chapters, we can certainly do that. Okay. Yeah. So also, Julianne, am I right to think that you're asking partly because you got some questions?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Good. Well, let's do this. Since you have questions, I'm going to do this. Let me bring forward. Okay, okay, here we go. So, oh, darn it. Hold on. Bear with me for just a sec. I'm messing stuff up.
I had another question too. I think it's kind of off the quiz though, so I'm not sure.
It's okay. We can definitely deal with it. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, hold on. All right, so one of the things that I thought might be worthwhile to do is to walk through these sections, right? So what we've done to date is only dip in now and then to the text, which you've been working through on your own, and we talk about concepts and so forth, but maybe we can work a little bit through the text. But let's organize according, Julianne, to your question. What are you thinking? What's bugging you?
Actually, if you just go through the text like you just mentioned, I think that would be kind of perfect.
Oh, will that work? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, just so you know, I think you've got a sense of this already from what we've done together in the past. It will be the case that some of the stuff we talk about is it's not that it's superfluous, it's not that it's added or padded, but it ends up being ideas that I hope help us make sense of the technical concepts and skills that we need to know and develop. Okay, so if you're not sure if something that I'm saying is maps onto like a skill that you need to develop, just say, hey Mia, what does this have to do with blah? Okay. All right. So what do we know already? Well, we already know that we have simple or atomic sentences, and a simple or atomic sentence is a sentence that does not have a connective. And what we know right now are connectives are negation, conjunction, disjunction, which are symbolized by the Boolean operators, tilde, or the notation we're using is are tilde, ampersand, and lowercase v, or wedge. Okay. It is the case though that our language and sort of our ordinary English is oftentimes better captured, or because of the way that we commonly speak, is exhibited best by way of what's known as the conditional or biconditional connective. So just as a heads up, so here's where I'm about to say something that's maybe like kind of, I hope, helpful background information. The Boolean connectives are, we understand, truth functional connectives. In other words, we say that a sentence, we say that a sentence's truth or falsity is a function of the sentences on which the connective operates, right? Not every logician thinks that that's the case with the conditional, and so also with the biconditional. So when we get to talking about truth functionality, when we get to talking, in other words, about the truth table for the conditional and the biconditional, don't be surprised if you find yourselves a little bit perplexed. And I hope that the way we address the perplexity will be useful to you. Okay? All right, so, whoopsie, started to I started to make the machine go to sleep. So sorry about that the dark screen glitch that you saw there. All right, so let's start with the conditional. The conditional is the if-then statement, or the conditional is a conditional statement. What do we mean by a conditional? Well, what we mean is that the outcome of the statement, that is at the end of the statement, I should say more specifically, is conditioned upon the first part. So when we have an if-then statement or a conditional statement, the then part of the statement is said to be conditioned upon the if part. Okay? So that's the first bit that we want to know. We symbolize the conditional with the arrow. It's not the only way you can symbolize a conditional claim, but it's the way that we're doing it. Okay. Now, if there's any exercise within the text that you want to go over, let me know and we will. But what I'm going to do is just trot through material. Then what I'm going to want to do is share my tablet screen with you and jot some notes so that you've got like an overview of the important concepts. Okay, so as I mentioned, the conditional claim, as our textbook tells us, asserts a type of conditionality between the if part and the then part. We call the sentence that comes after the if part, because remember, were we to just say if A, we don't actually have a full sentence, right? So the sentence A is a complete sentence where, let's say, A is, I have an apple, or I have an A in the class, right? Were we to say, if I have an apple, and then stop right there, we wouldn't have a grammatical sentence, right? We'd have a part of a sentence. We'd have a condition. So, or if we say, were we to say, if I have an A, and then stop right there, we wouldn't have a sentence. So the if part is the part that tells us what is antecedent. So the sentence "I have an apple" or "I have an A in the class," that's the part that goes in this case with the if. That's called the antecedent. And the then part of the sentence, the part that's dependent on the if, right, is called the consequent. So, you could say something like this: if I have an apple, then I have something to eat. If I have an A in the class, then I am feeling pretty good about things right now. By themselves, if I have an apple, doesn't say anything. Then I have something to eat, doesn't say anything. Those by themselves are not grammatical, right? So we put them together and the arrow separates the if part from the then part. The if clause is called the antecedent. The then clause is called the consequent. Okay. Now, we're going to want to talk about some interesting things about conditionals. For what it's worth, here again, I'm just throwing out some information that may or may not be useful to you. Not only have articles been written about the conditional, but books have. It's a really interesting connective. The conditional claim itself is a really interesting claim type. In fact, there was a time when I really wanted to sit in on a semester-long class called Conditionals. I was so excited. Alas, I couldn't. I had to work. Oh, it was heartbreaking. Right, but so if you find yourself wondering things about the conditional, you're not alone. It's a rich topic. In fact, we oftentimes assert causal relationships in conditional claim form, and causation is another really important philosophical concept. Okay. All right, so let's move on to. Come here, next section. You can do it. Now, the biconditional is our other propositional logic connective. And it is effectively a two-way arrow. So what it says is X is the case if and only if Y is the case. And we're going to hear language like P is necessary and sufficient for Q. Right? When you have P, you have Q, and when you have Q, you have P. You'll also hear language that sounds very Boolean, namely, either you have both P and Q or you have neither, right? So the biconditional asserts a joint claim for the elements of a conditional. In other words, the P in a biconditional is both the antecedent and the consequent, as is Q, just separated out into two conditional claims. Okay. Here's some language that I don't know if you like. I have always found this phrase to be confusing. I still don't know why, but I do. When we see the phrase just in case, right? That's also what we replace with the biconditional, right? So I get a little bit turned around with the just in case, but there it is. It's one of those things where I say to myself, okay, I'm confused by this. I've been confused by it for a long time. I haven't set aside the necessary time to think about it and read about it so that I can become less confused, but I'm putting it on my list. So in the meantime, however, in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and accept that this is the case. Okay, now we move on to translating. Now, this is stuff that we're going to want to spend a bit of time on when we are looking at our at the notes that I'm going to jot for us. When you think of a conditional claim, an if-then claim, a hypothetical claim, And you think of the left side of the arrow as the antecedent, the right side of the arrow as the consequent. Add to your thinking the following. The left side of the arrow is where the sufficient condition goes. The right side of the arrow is where the necessary condition goes. In addition, bear in mind that lots of times people claim that something is a sufficient condition for something else, but they claim erroneously. So we've got to separate out what the claim is from what we actually know to be the case, right? So let's think about these examples. Being a horse is a sufficient condition for being a mammal. That's another way of saying being a horse guarantees that you're an animal, that you're a mammal, right? In turn, being a mammal guarantees that you're an animal, and you can probably get the inference that therefore being a horse is sufficient for being an animal. The idea is this: when you see the language of sufficiency and we'll see necessity, you'll see that you can reformulate the sentence in if-then terms. So being a horse is sufficient for being an animal becomes H arrow M. Okay? The sufficient necessary relationship can be a little bit confusing, so we'll talk about it some more. But I hope that when we put the relationship in terms of validity, that you'll say, oh, this makes more sense. But for right now, let's just say that when we're talking about a necessary condition, we're talking about that without which something can't obtain, right? So think about it this way. If I am alive, then I must have oxygen, or then I necessarily have oxygen. I'm necessarily breathing, right? Without oxygen, I'm not going to be alive, right? So oxygen is a necessary condition. So you get some of the shorthand over here for the notion of sufficiency in connection with the translation into symbolic logic notation, right? Do you also see the way that the concepts of sufficiency and necessity, whether they're correct or claimed, right, is such that the necessary condition always goes on the right and the sufficient condition always goes on the left. Notice I said earlier when we were talking about the biconditional that P becomes a jointly sufficient and necessary condition for P. P if and only if Q, right? P is both the antecedent and the consequent on two separate claims that are then conjoined together. More on that in a little bit. Before we move on to truth tables, I want to do a little bit of note making on the tablet. But before doing that, Julianne, did the question or questions that you have come up yet? If so, did I address them? Do you want to chat more? Tell me how you're feeling.
I think I'm okay for now. I wrote it in the chat, but I just wanted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed the.
There was like in 17.1. I think it's just how I'm reading it, or just like how my brain is working.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering if we could do like a couple questions from exercise 5 and 6, just so I could visually like see it done.
Yeah. So yeah, I apologize. I thought I was being a super organized person by having the chat window right in front of me, and then I just was looking at the other screen. Okay, but so here's my question. 5 and 6 in chapter 17, section 1, is that what you're after?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then after that, like my confusion just started coming at like 17.4.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
All right. So let's do the, actually, no, what am I doing? I'm being a dunderhead. Hold on. Well, I could just go back now anyway. So 17.1. Okay. 3, 4, 5. Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah, that was confusing me.
yeah.
The rest of it was fine, but once I started trying to read it, I was like,
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this to start. I'm so excited. And remember, don't forget, I get excited about this in large part because you know the mantra, you know the class mantra, right? If Mia can do this, I can do it, right? I'm like the lowest common denominator. If I can do this, anybody can. So I'm excited to share with you the following. All right, so here are some notes. I'm gonna duplicate these when we get to when I write notes. But let me start with this. We know that when we have a conditional claim, right? We have if. I'm trying. And by the way, I'm writing really slowly because I'm using my mouse track. I'm using the trackpad and my right hand, and it's all manner of awful. It's even worse than usual. So I'm going very slowly, trying to write clearly, legibly, I should say. Okay, so far so good, right? We've got if then. We also have, I'm going to try my left hand. It's not going to go well. No, forget it. I can't do it. It's too awkward for me. All right. We also have antecedent, and I'm going to abbreviate here because this will go, it'll just get worse and worse if I try to write out the whole word. So antecedent and consequent, right? Do you also remember from, I'm going to jump ahead even though we're in 17.1, do you also remember that the sufficient condition goes on the left, right? Correct? And the necessary sufficient goes on the, necessary sufficient, really, Mia? The necessary condition goes on the right. Yeah? So, we know that our standard translation is whatever comes after if goes on the left, whatever comes after then goes on the right. So what do we do about animals like phrases like only if? Well, let's talk about what we think the word only means. And let's take an example, something like this. I'm going to go to the movies only if you do. So how about this? Mia goes to the movies only if Julianne does. How might you rephrase only if? I mean, what are you, Julianne, in this whole deal? And by whole deal, I mean our plans to go to the movies. I'm going to the movies only if you do, Julianne.
so it's like maybe or possibly. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, let's focus on you. Is my going related to your going? Am I going with or without you? How's that? In other words, am I going to go regardless of whether or not you go?
No, you're only gonna go if I go.
Okay. Notice now what you're doing. You're saying that your going is a necessary condition. Your going, sorry, without you going, I won't go. Right? So, does it make sense to write the following. So it ends up, and this is why it gets a little bit confusing because I'm going to duplicate the word if. We can rewrite the sentence as, or restate the sentence as follows. If Mia goes, then Julianne goes. If Mia goes, then Julianne must be going. What do we think?
It makes a little more sense, but I'm still kind of.
Okay, we're going to keep working on it, so don't stress about that. Pia is never guilty without Quinn, right? So we're saying that Quinn is necessary, right? Quinn is necessary to Pia's status as guilty or not. Okay. All right. So let's take that and continue on. I'm only erasing because, as you know, with the annotator in the Zoom program, the text stays still while you're scrolling. All right. So exercise 6. So given what we know about what goes on the left side of the arrow and what goes on the right side of the arrow, how are you going to understand antecedent and consequent?
Bring it up too.
And don't be shy about taking something like what I wrote just a moment ago in connection with what we've already discussed, but then specifically exercise 5 here in 17.1. Think about the chart, right? Where you plug in what's on the left side, what's on the right side of your arrow. So does it make sense that the antecedent is the entirety of the sentence, not Q? And the consequent is the entirety of the sentence, not P. Yeah? And then when you identified, just like you did with the bool operators, when you've identified the main operator, here it's the condition, it's the arrow, right? Then everything to the left of the arrow is your antecedent. Everything to the right of the arrow is your consequent. What's our thinking? Is everybody comfortable or no?
Yeah. So in exercise 1, the antecedent, the negation Q. Sorry, the one we were just looking at.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
So then the negation Q is the then part. Sorry, I don't know if I'm saying that right.
So reading left to right, we get the following. If not Q, then not P.
Okay.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You did it explained.
Well,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and you know what I'm wondering too, tell me if I'm wrong about this, you probably, I would think you converted or contraposed the thing so that you end up with swapping the Q and P places and eliminating the negations, which is a valid move. You'd end up with P then Q.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So notice what you're doing. You're thinking so fast. A lot of us want to get rid of negations. We're not comfortable with negations. And so you did a quick flip, right? To then say, it's P then Q. Or if P then Q.
Yeah, this was good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Good for you. Okay, so before we move on to where's my pencil? Before we move on to truth tables. Sorry guys, where's my pencil? Oh, duh. Found it. Okay, so let's do this. I'm gonna share my whiteboard. And okay, so here we are in chapter 17, and we are learning propositional connectives, conditional and biconditional. Okay. All right, so in addition to the Boolean connectives, which we know to be negation. Here, I'm just going to put this in a parenthetical. That'll probably end up being grammatically clearer. So negation, conjunction, and disjunction, we can compound sentences using the conditional and biconditional. Now remember, what we're going to end up doing is this. We're going to get to the point where we're assembling and disassembling sentences at the joints, right? Not just conjunction and disjunction, and I know negation is not really a joint, but it operates on a sentence. But we'll add to that the conditional and the biconditional. So what we end up with in the complete system of a propositional logic is a set of intro and a limb rules for negation, conjunction, disjunction, conditional, biconditional. And then, of course, we also know what a truth functional contradiction is, as well as how to eliminate it. That's also a part of the Boolean part of the Boolean system that we're adding now to which we're adding the propositional logic connectives. Okay, so conditional claims are if, then, or hypotheticals. They assert a condition between the if and then elements, right? So let's talk about the symbolization. So, but first, here's an example. If I have an A in class, then I feel good, right? And let's go ahead and translate that as follows. Let's say I have an A in class with A, and I feel good with G, and we get the following. If I have an A in class, then I feel good. We also know that the way we talk about the parts of a conditional claim are as follows. The if clause is the antecedent. The then clause, although the clauses don't include the part of speech if then, right, is the consequent. So we have antecedent, consequent, right? And we're going to say, I have an A in class is the antecedent, right? So let's go back to the example here. I have an A, and the consequent, I feel good. And notice that the clauses are, right, complete sentences. They're complete grammatical sentences. Now, we've already seen when we were looking at the, I think it was we're just now in section 1 of chapter 17, that, the conditional claim can be made up of rather complicated sentences, right? It's just that the arrow itself is what drives the sentence. Okay. How are we doing? So far, so good? Does this ring bells? Right? And B, does it help a little bit to kind of pull a number of ideas that are running across these sections together?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so far so good? Okay, good. And we'll do this more, Julianne. So for example, we can always, and do it from here on out if we want, start off by looking at the text and then kind of pulling a number of ideas together. All right, so next thing that we want to do is this. So we talked about the conditional claim in terms of the if then and the antecedent and consequent. Let's also view all whiteboard. Sorry, I forgot the last thing I wrote. Hold on. So we've got, if then. Okay. So now we also want to say that the antecedent is the sufficient condition the consequent, the consequent is the necessary condition. And what we can do also is go ahead and notate that. And then we'll do like a summary here. Okay, so antecedent, should be sufficient. Sorry. Right, so sufficient, arrow, necessary, and then we do want to say something about what we mean when we're talking about sufficiency and necessity. Hold on to that because we will get to it. Okay. So what do we have so far? So in sum, here's what might be a helpful chart, right? So we have if, then, we have antecedent and consequent. We have sufficient condition and necessary condition. Right, so when we're looking at ordinary English sentences, this is our basic guide to translations. Okay. But we do, like I said, want to say something more about the idea of sufficiency and necessity. But let's talk a little bit about the biconditional first. That might be useful to us. So we said earlier, right? We've got the we've got the conditional claim, right? Now we need to talk about the biconditional. So, oops, let me go back to black. So the biconditional is a two-way conditional claim. So here are some ways to think about it. So we can say if A, then B, and if B, then A. We can say, here's some more just sort of basic language. A, if, and only if B. A, just in case B. A is a sufficient and necessary condition for B. And, you know, in our ordinary English, we don't use this language, I think, very often. I mean, you're going to find it in the sciences and in mathematics, but it's not like we use it on, on a daily basis. And it's also the case that, because it's the language when we do see it is very often in the language of sufficiency and necessity, and that can be a little bit confusing or discombobulating. It ends up feeling like, we end up feeling kind of overwhelmed. So I think that's partly why having a chart, some handy way to think about this stuff makes it a bit easier. All right, so we know that we translate it as, in terms of notation, as follows: A, if and only if B, right? So what this says, so let's think about some equivalences. If A, then B, and if B, then A, right? Remember I mentioned this earlier. We could also say, look, I either have both A and B, or I have neither one of them, right? So how are we doing with this? Does this make some sense so far? And are we ready to talk a little bit about the idea of sufficiency and necessity? And then, and in so doing, we'll come back to the only if phrase, which is really important. I mean, think about it this way: if you're thinking about like a career in law, or even if you just, I don't know, use English, it's going to be the case that when you see the phrase only if, you don't want to mistake it for the structure where what comes after if comes on the left side of the arrow, or is the so-called sufficient condition. Okay, so let me give you some examples. So on sufficiency and necessity. Right, and this is important not only with respect to, thinking about the aforementioned, law, but also thinking in terms of the sciences. It also is important to the way that we oftentimes formulate, for example, moral claims, specifically claims about moral responsibility. What we are what is impossible for us to do or not to do, right? And so we use the language of sufficiency and necessity lots of times there too. All right, so here are some examples. So examples, if I eat a potato chip, then I have something on or in my stomach. Eating a potato chip is sufficient for me to have something in my stomach. We're going to keep going with the potato chip. Eating a potato chip guarantees I have something in my stomach. Question for you. Must I eat a potato chip to have something in my stomach? In other words, is eating a potato chip necessary to having something in my stomach?
No.
Right. Good. Yeah. Good. I know you both are, the tone of your voice says, Mia, what are you doing, you weirdo? Of course it's not. Right. So you understand that it's fair for us to claim. In other words, it's accurate to say that eating a potato chip guarantees I have something in my stomach. Eating a potato chip is a sufficient condition for me to have something in my stomach, but it's not necessary, right? Okay. Now, necessary conditions might seem a little bit harder. So let's, so on sufficiency and necessity, with respect to necessity. So how about this? If I eat a potato chip, a potation, that's what I just wrote. I wrote potation. Sure. If I eat a potato chip, then I have, in other words, I must have something in my stomach. How about this? Without something in my stomach, I can't have eaten a potato chip. That's awkward, I know. Right? Let's go ahead and change up the example. Might help us a little bit, right, to think about necessity. So if I'm not mistaken, how about this? Completing 60 units is necessary for transfer. Completing 60 units is required for transfer. You can't transfer without completing 60 units. And by the way, I'm going to stipulate, Cameron, that the 60 units is, 60 transferable units, right? Now, question for you. Is completing 60 units sufficient for transfer?
Yeah, isn't it?
Right. So here's one of the tricky parts. When we're in so we're not talking about natural necessity here. We're talking about a convention of the institutions, right? No, it's actually not sufficient. What else has to happen? You've got to be in good standing. I mean, there have been people who it's awful when if their transfer gets held up because, they owe a parking ticket fee or something lame like that, right? So, it's 60 units and being in good standing with the community, right? But does this language, make some sense? So, if you transfer, you must, and typically we'd say you must have completed, but you must complete 60 units. I know my writing is almost entirely illegible. Is there anything you want to go over on that front so that you can decipher, or can I decipher for you what I've written? Or is there a concept that you want to talk about? Okay, so far so good. All right, so now let's go back to only if. Right, so X only if Y. Y is necessary for X. Right? So we say X arrow Y. So you'd say something like, you can vote only if you are registered. Right? So registration is a requirement for voting. Make sure you vote. Right? You can vote only if you're registered. So we can make R, you are registered, V, you can vote. So vote only if registered. What do we think? How are we doing? And there are all sorts of interesting things to talk about, but I want to make sure that we're getting kind of just the nuts and bolts out first. What do we think?
So, because I'm not sure how to ask this question.
Okay.
So I'm going to attempt. So is the only if the necessity or the... Oh, okay.
Really good, Julianne.
Okay, yeah. I couldn't think of how to word what I wanted to ask.
Only if expresses a necessary condition. The necessary condition goes in the consequent position. It's like a little rhyme.
Okay, I think I'm getting it then.
All right. So, only if expresses a necessary condition. The necessary condition is translated in the consequent position. So remember, sufficient, arrow, necessary. All right. Are we ready for some truth tables? I know, it's pretty exciting. I understand if you're feeling a little, overwhelmed with excitement. Don't be too overwhelmed though, because you need to tell me if you've got any issues, right? If there's anything that we need to talk about. Okay, good. Berman is overwhelmed with excitement, which is good. All we need is one. There was some I saw earlier where I could do like a double screen share. Hold on just a second. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm going to try something. Oh. Now see, the same thing that happened earlier today, I think just happened here, which is the whiteboard went away for you, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah, you switched it to the book.
Yeah. So what I had wanted to do is keep the whiteboard up, but that's okay. Not to worry. Okay, so let's do this. Let's talk about truth tables. We can come back to translations and so forth, but let's go to the truth table section. Okay, so we've talked about before, so we previously talked about the idea that that the truth table is a way for us to articulate the definition of a given operator, where that definition is true or false depending on the values of the constituent sentences. And it's also the case that the operator performs a certain function, right? So truth is a function of how the operator works on these sentences. One way that you can work a truth table is to just, go through like a rote memorization process. Some people like that. They find that really useful. Some people don't. We're going to do both so that I hope we cover both bases. Notice the setup over here, right, where you've got your possible values for the sentence P and the possible values for the sentence Q. And it is those values in connection with the function of the conditional that generates these rows. So, on the one hand, we could say the following. All right, here's how arrow or the conditional, the material conditional is defined. A conditional is false when and only when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. Good, I'm done. That's all I need to know. That's all I care about. Off I go to the next. Right? So you could do that. And you could, have working for yourself, or you could have, not working for yourself. You could have, like a little shorthand like we did with the Boolean operators. So for example, you could do something like this. I know that when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false, that arrow itself is false. That's really ugly. Right? This is how arrow is defined, right? So you could certainly go that route. Okay? But at some point you might still find that that confusion arises, right? For example, you might say, well, why is it false on row 2? But here we've got a false true relationship, not a true false. Why isn't it false on row 3? And holy frickin' moly, how is it even possible that a false antecedent and a false consequent yield a true conditional claim? That just seems, bat crap crazy. You might not say bat crap, but you know, I just did. Okay, so we do want to make some sense of this. First off, I'm going to approach the issue from the following standpoint, and I think that, by the way, let me go ahead and erase the annotation first. Give me just a sec. Okay, so first, Dr. Schnee does a nice job of explaining the truth values, right? So, I hope that is clear to you. It's also the case that the examples, I think, really help to make sense of the truth values. Let me add the following. Where, I mentioned earlier that, articles and books and have been written about the conditional. There are some who argue that the conditional is, it's not truth functional. And a number of examples are given to show that there are times when a false antecedent and a false consequent yield a false conditional, right? So how is it that we end up with these definitions for the conditional? Well, one way to think about the values that we're given here is in terms of the concept of validity. What do we know about an argument that is invalid? An argument that is invalid is one in which the premises do not guarantee the conclusion. In other words, an invalid argument is one in which the premises are true, but the conclusion is still false. That's row 2. So some logicians say, look, we're going to basically stipulate these truth definitions for the conditional. It works in this system, and anybody can understand it. So it's not like it's beyond the bounds of plausibility. And it is, they sometimes call it the material conditional to separate it from other ways of thinking about the conditional. So the truth functional conditional or the material conditional is the one that has the value of false on row 2, and we can think about it in terms of a valid argument. The only time an argument is invalid is when the premises are true and the conclusion is false. So think about the if part, right? Remember, if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true when we're talking about validity. So if we get an argument whose premises are true, but we don't, but we're not thereby committed or forced to accept the conclusion, then the argument is invalid, right? And remember, we can have premises, a combination of true and false premises and a true conclusion, a combination of true and false premises and a false conclusion. We can have all true premises and a true conclusion, all false premises and a false conclusion, right? We can have all those permutations. It's row 2 that we can't have. So the conditional maps onto, the concept of validity maps onto the truth table for the conditional, okay? There are, I also can, if it's okay with you, will offer you some ways that you can think about the conditional such that your intuition is pumped, right? I'm sort of arguably fudging a bit. So let me try this. All right, so if Pierce College is in Woodland Hills, then Pierce College is in California. Okay. If Pierce College is in Woodland Hills, then Pierce College is in France. And if Pierce College is in Santa Monica, then Pierce College is in California. If Pierce College is in Santa Monica, then Pierce College is by the ocean. All right, hold tight because I know that we need to make this a little bit easier to see. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take as a given that the Pierce College we're talking about is our Pierce College, right? It's Los Angeles Pierce College in Woodland Hills. Let's also understand that when we're talking about California, we're talking about the state of California, right? Yeah, I mean, just sort of our common understandings, right? So if you're not sure what each of these values means, use what you know in each of the sentences to answer the question, is it true, right? So if Pierce College is in Woodland Hills, then it's in California. Is that true? And your intuition is probably yes. If Pierce College is in Woodland Hills, then it is in France. No, that's false. If Pierce College is in Santa Monica, then it's in California. Yes. And here again, right, we're talking about the Santa Monica that we know. If Pierce College is in Woodland, or sorry, rephrase. If Pierce College is in Santa Monica, then it is by the ocean. Yeah, that's true. Right, so just because it's false that Pierce is in Santa Monica and it's false that it's on the ocean or by the ocean, right? Pierce College is in the valley. If it's in Santa Monica, that's false. By the ocean, that's false. But if it's in Santa Monica, it's by the ocean, right? So I hope that these examples kind of give you a way to pump your intuition about each row of the truth table. As I said before, you can come up with a counter to row 4 where you have a false antecedent and a false consequent, and the conditional itself you'd say is false, right? But then we return to the point earlier about the stipulating of the definition for the conditional in logic. So we stipulate it. We can use it successfully without violating any logical principles. How is this going so far? What do we think? Okay, so what I want to do now is... so before we move on, is there anything about the discussion here with respect to the truth values that that you want to talk about? So far, so good, I hope. Okay. So remember earlier, Julianne, when we had the sentence, I'm going to highlight this. Remember earlier we had the sentence, not Q, then not P. And the question was, which is the antecedent, which is the consequent? And you contraposed it. You turned it into P then Q. Right? You had done it so quickly, I think you hadn't realized that you had done it. Just so you know, these are truth table equivalences, right? These are truth functional equivalences. And, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just responding.
Does that ring bells?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Okay, good. And then also notice that we can get from a set of Boolean connectives to the conditional and the biconditional, right? I think we've partly seen that already, or seen a couple of instances, right? But as I mentioned earlier, the conditional kind of allows us a bit more flexibility to deal with our ordinary English sentences. Okay. All right. So we then get the truth table for the biconditional. Now, most often, the following explanation helps to resolve any confusion about the values. Remember, we said that the biconditional asserts an equivalence. And you might say, what do you mean, Mia? We didn't assert that we didn't say that the biconditional asserts an equivalence. Well, implicitly we did, and we'll talk more about that. But for the moment, think, okay, so if the biconditional is effectively saying that when I have one, I have the other, and vice versa, that means that the two values have to be equivalent, right? So think about it this way. When I say if I have P, then I have Q, and if I have Q, I have P, that means I've got both, right? Either both are there, wherever the there is, right? Or both are not, row 1, row 4, right? Think about the biconditional as like the Tweedledee and Tweedledum rule. You never see Tweedledee without Tweedledum, and you never see Tweedledum without Tweedledee. They are joint necessary and sufficient conditions, right? So the equivalence of the two elements is what generates these values. So now let me go back up to equivalence. Notice the symbol, and we've been using this symbol since Boolean days, right? Remember when we talked about, for example, De Morgan's equivalences, or idempotence, or commutativity, any of those truth table equivalences, right? The way that we express truth table equivalence is by a version of the biconditional. Isn't that super fun? I'm not feeling excitement. What's going on? How's everybody doing? Is everybody just super tired? So thank you, Abdul. We've got some hand clapping. Okay, so where we are right now is, I think, in pretty good shape, just in terms of what we need to know to move forward. What I'd like to do is actually effectively work ahead just for a couple minutes by way of unpacking some of the ideas that we talked about earlier. So let's do this. I'm going to go back to the tablet screen share. Here we go. Why isn't it? Huh. That's interesting. Oh, you know what? I think it's sharing. Oh, no, it should share. Oh, I see the display it's sharing. Well, that's lame. Okay. Sorry. I'm just talking to myself. Don't worry about me. Hold on half a second. Let me fix the stop. Okay. Stop share. There we go. All right. So, whoa, hello. Okay, so you're seeing the whiteboard now, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to pull together a couple of concepts that I hope will make sense to you. Then we can back up and do a bit of practice with truth tables and and we can address like any questions you might have about translations. So first, remember we said that we had some example like this. I go to the movies only if Julianne wants to go. Alas, that was really, forget that because it looks ugly. It turns out it's not the case that Julianne wants to go. So, fill in the blank. I go to the movies only if Julianne wants to go. It's not the case that Julianne wants to go, so
I'm not going to the movies.
beautiful. Thank you, Abdul. So, I'm not going to the movies. All right, awesome. How about this one? If Pierce College is in Woodland Hills, then Pierce College is in the San Fernando Valley. Pierce College is in Woodland Hills. So, what do we infer?
Pierce College is in San Fernando Valley.
Fabulous. Thank you, Abdul. Perfect. Pierce College is in the San Fernando Valley. Okay. At least the second example has a form that you've already seen. Okay. Let's go ahead and start with that. So, what if we do this? Let's translate as follows. Let's make W, Pierce College is in Woodland Hills. Let's make V, San Fernando Valley. Yeah, okay. So tell me if this translation works for you. So premise 1, if Pierce College is in Woodland Hills, then Pierce College is in the San Fernando Valley. So if W, then San Fernando Valley. Premise 2, Pierce College is in Woodland Hills. And then 3 is the inference. So, thus, or so, hold on, I wrote that poorly. Thus, Pierce College is in San Fernando Valley. How does that look to everybody? Pretty good? On the assumption that it looked good. Oh, we got thumbs up. Yay. Okay, so now let's go ahead and write out a truth table. So we've got W arrow V then we've got W, and then we've got V. Now we've got two simple sentences, right? Pierce College is in Woodland Hills. Pierce College is in the San Fernando Valley, right? So that means we have 4 rows. We also know that neither the second premise nor the conclusion is a compound. So what does that tell us? Well, we just plug in the values from the reference column. And I haven't written the reference columns only because I figured that we're okay without those. That we know when we have 2 simple or atomic sentences that we have 4 rows. The leftmost sentence takes half true, half false, and the second or rightmost takes alternating true, false, true, false. What do we know about the conditional? The conditional is false when and only when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. So true, false, true, true, right? Is there a row on which the conclusion is false? Yeah, there are 2 rows. There's row 2 and row 4, but on the same row that the conclusion is false, are both premises true? No. So the argument is valid. In fact, we call the argument, and we'll see this as we go forward, the mode of affirmation or affirming the antecedent, or it's also known as modus ponens. We'll call it conditional elim. Okay, so our truth table shows us that the argument is valid. But what we're going to want to do is to talk about how the rule works. Okay, what it means, in other words, to affirm the antecedent. We're going to talk about it when we get there in terms of sufficiency. All right, let's go up to the top one. So how about we do this? Let's use I for I go to the movies, and let's use J for Julianne goes to the movies. Do you remember how you translate only if? Go ahead and tell me or type how this first premise should look. And remember that we one of the nice features about the notation that we're using in this version of the system is we don't need any special symbols. We can just type a dash and then a greater than symbol, right? So go ahead and tell me what to write on for line number 1. What's our translation going to look like?
Someone wrote something in the chat.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, thank you, Julian. I was looking for the chat. Thank you, Abdul. I was looking for the chat, and then I turned the lid of my laptop down. I lost the chat. Good one, Mia. All right. So I, arrow, J. Okay. How about the second premise? It's not the case that Julianne wants to go.
So negation symbol J.
Beautiful. And the conclusion?
Negation symbol I.
Beautiful. All right. Let's go ahead and put this into a truth table. I, arrow, J, not J, not I. And you know what? Just for fun, let's go ahead and put the reference columns in. So I, J, so true. I can write a T. Sure I can. So true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. All right, where are we? Are we ready to put our values in for premise 1? If so, what are they? and take a look at the first exercise we did down below. What were the values there? Don't we just basically, not basically, don't we just copy them over because we've got two atomic sentences? The main connective is the arrow. So what do we get? True, false, true, true. Okay. How about the second premise, not J? Tell me what to write.
False.
Yep. Keep going.
Oh, true.
Uh-huh.
False. False.
The last value for J is false. So not false is,
True.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think you were thinking of, I don't know what you were thinking of, but that's okay. How about not I? Are you guys ready for that one? What are we going to write?
False, false, true, true.
False, false, true, true. Thank you, Abdul. Here again.
Professor, quick question.
Yeah,
before
what are you
we go
thinking?
Further. How did you get the truth value for the conditional? You said something earlier that I missed.
Oh, okay. So the conditional is true in every case except one, or another way to put it is this. The conditional is false when and only when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. So antecedent is true, consequent is false. That's row 2.
Okay, so it's only false if the antecedent is true and the consequent is false.
Correct.
That's the only time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you got it. Beautiful. All right, so now if we look at rows 1 and 2, we see that the conclusion is false, but so also is each of, sorry, I started a sentence that I couldn't figure out how to finish grammatically. Anyway, so on row number 1, the conclusion is false, but so also is the second premise. On row number 2, the conclusion is false, but so also is the first premise. So there's no row on which the premises are true while the conclusion is false, so the argument is valid. And just as an FYI, this argument form is known as Modus Tollens or mode of denial. It denies the consequent, right? And then we'll see it generated by way of, interestingly enough, a negation intro subproof. Okay. How are we doing? What do we think? Is it the case that, for example, you say, I'm seeing stuff that we've done before. It's recurring. It's happening again. We're just expanding, if you will, our logical vocabulary. All right, let's try a few exercises where we're generating a more complicated truth table. So let's remember this. So conditional is defined in terms of a valid argument. It is true on every row except row 2, where the antecedent is true. And, oh, that was really, I didn't even try to be legible there. Sorry about that. Where the antecedent is true. That's just as bad. Oi. And the consequent is false. right? So P arrow Q, true antecedent, false consequent. The whole thing is false. The biconditional is defined in terms of equivalence. When, let me rephrase this. When both sides have the same truth values, so that's row 1 and row 4, the sentence is true. And so what I'm about to write is not as seamless as the first shorthand, but it still gets the job done. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, let's generate some truth values. Okay, so first off, what's the main operator? Is it the negation, the conditional, the conjunction, or the biconditional?
The conjunction.
Beautiful. So that means we work the conjunction last. Let's stick with the left side for right now, the left side of the conjunction. What's the main operator? Is it the negation or the conditional?
The negation.
Right. So that means that we got to work the conditional first, then the negation, and then we move over to the biconditional, and then lastly, the conjunction. And I mean, we could work the right side of the conjunction first. We know that, right? But I just figured we'll go left to right. All right. So given our truth definitions, and sorry about this, this was really not very attractive. Given our truth definitions, what are we going to write under the values for the conditional?
True, false, true, false.
Almost. Remember
False, true.
remember the only time the conditional is false is when the antecedent's true and the consequent is false. I know,
Both false, then it's true.
yeah, and remember that is a little bit off-putting, right? And we can talk more about it, but if the Pierce College example helps, bear that in mind, right? So, if Pierce College is in Santa Monica, then Pierce College is by the ocean. It's false that Pierce is in Santa Monica. It's false that it's by the ocean. But it's true that if it is in Santa Monica, then it's by the ocean.
Got it.
Yeah. Good. All right. And so now we're going to negate all of these values. So not true is
False.
false. Not false is.
True.
Not true is.
False.
Not true is.
False.
Beautiful. Meow. And now the biconditional. What do we know about its values?
it's true, false, false, false.
True, false, false.
And false.
Are you sure?
Oh, sorry, true.
Yeah, good. Remember, think of your biconditional as the equivalence sign, right? So, and equivalent values. And equivalent means identical, right? Okay, so now we've got these. So now we're ready to go back to our old friend, the truth definitions for the conjunction. So false conjunction true is
False.
yeah, good. Keep going. And don't be shy. Speak up at the same time if you want. True conjunction false is
False.
false conjunction false is
False.
good. False conjunction true is
False.
awesome. So holy moly, look, check this out, folks. We've got a self-contradictory sentence, or our text calls it a taut falsity, a tautological falsity, or a truth table falsity. What do we think? Let's do a couple more. Let's look at some equivalences, okay? All right, so okay, if P then Q, either it's not P or it is Q. So we know that the arrow is false on row 2 alone. In all other cases, it's true. We also know that the disjunction is the main operator in the second sentence. So we work our values for not P first, and then we compare the not P values with Q's values by way of the disjunction. So we have true, false, true, true. Notice that we have a tautologically equivalent set of sentences. What do we think? Okay, so let's go back to our ordinary English, right? So how about this? If I go, oh, come on, Mia. I can do better. If I go to the movies, then Julianne goes to the movies. Which is equivalent to saying either I don't go to the movies or Julianne does. Right? You can also say if I transfer, then I have completed 60 units. Either I don't transfer or I haven't transferred. Let's just put it that. Let's do that instead. Either I haven't transferred or I have completed 60 units. Right, so remember, we've got a couple of ways of saying the same thing, and the couple of ways are understood in logical terms, more specifically in truth functional terms. How are we doing? What do we think? So far, so good?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. Are you, are you, Julianne, sorry. I was going to ask you like 3 different questions at once. Did the questions that you had mentioned having earlier, do you want to talk about those? Have they been addressed? What's going on for you?
They've been addressed. I think because when I read the text, I just understand it to an extent, but when it's explained to me and used in different words, it makes more sense. So
Yeah.
writing out these truth tables and stuff and hearing out the whole sentence help.
Okay,
So,
good.
I feel good now.
Good. Okay, that's great. And I do think, one of the things that that I find helpful is when I get one idea presented several different ways. Sometimes people find that confusing and not helpful. So that, if you know that you prefer to have a different presentation, then you can basically organize your time accordingly. You might say, okay, I'm going to, read through the material, see what I can glean, note what questions I have, and then in class I'm going to say this is what I want to talk about and make sure that those items are addressed. Okay, so let's do a couple more, or at least one more. We'll see how you're feeling. Actually, I'll go ahead and write it out because I think we should work this because we talked about it. Okay, so we've got our reference values. We know that if we just go left to right, we've only got one connective here. It's the biconditional. And then when we look at so that should be pretty straightforward, I hope, right? We know that a biconditional is false when and only when we have opposite values, right? We don't have equivalent values. So that's going to be rows 2 and 3. So true, false, false, true, right? And then on the right side, our conjunction is the main connective. So that operator's values are determined last. It doesn't matter which arrow we do first. Let's go right to left this time. What the heck, right? But don't forget we're doing the sentence Q then P. So we've got to look at our Q values first. Q is the antecedent on the left side of the conjunction. So it's going to go true, arrow, true. It's going to go false, arrow, true, true, arrow, false, and then false, arrow, false. Take a look and tell me if you have any questions about that. Questions, problems, confusions. And don't be shy. You can always, when you're working, if you're writing something out on your own, just go ahead and put the values directly beneath the simple sentence. And that way you don't get confused by having to look at the right reference column. Right side reference column. Okay. All right. So then P arrow Q, true, false, true, true. And then finally, our conjunction, true, false, false, true. Can erase our sub values and hello, truth functional equivalence. P if and only if Q says the same thing, truth functionally, as if P then Q and if Q then P. Questions, problems, confusions on that one? Okay, last one, unless there's something else that you want to go over. You tell me what to write. So let's do the harder side first. By harder, I just mean more complicated. In the sentence, negation Q, arrow negation P, which is the main connective, main operator? Is it the left negation, the right negation, or the conditional?
The conditional.
Awesome. So it doesn't matter which negation we do first, right? But we're going to do the arrow last. All right, so let's go right to left. Not P. Give me those values.
False, false, true, true.
False, false, true, true. Perfect. Not Q.
False, true, false, true.
False, true, false, true. And then arrow.
True. False.
Yep. Good.
And then true
Yep.
and true.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to erase our subvalues. And lastly, arrow itself. What do we write?
Are we doing the left side now? Or?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Abdul. I'm just sitting here. Yeah, let's do arrow. P arrow Q.
Oh, so that would be true, false, true, true.
Perfect. Right? So here's another equivalence. And in some versions of the system, if you swap one out for the other because they're equivalent in a proof, if you swap one out for another because they're equivalent, you're contraposing them. Awesome. So are you guys noticing, and I'm saying this because I'm hoping that it's true and I want you to feel good about things. Are you noticing that, we're doing a lot of the same stuff over and over again, just shifting some of our conceptual focus, right? So, we know how to construct a truth table. We know how to identify a simple sentence. We know what compounds a simple sentence. We know negation compounds, conjunction compounds, disjunction compounds, and now we add to that the conditional compounds, the biconditional compounds. We can make all sorts of sentences as long as we are clear about our notation. For example, we use parentheses when we need them, right? Then we can create all sorts of sentences which we can then construct truth tables, right? And so we already know how to construct a truth table. We know that a truth table is going to take, the number of rows in a truth table is going to be determined by the number of simple or atomic sentences, right? So, we can lay out the number of rows. We know how many T's and F's and in what order you get for the leftmost and then all the way down to the rightmost. And then we know how to identify main operators, how to build up to a main operator in terms of determining truth values, right? The subtruth value up to the value of the sentence itself, right? So I hope that this, is starting to feel pretty comfortable to you in terms of the familiarity, right? And also that you feel a more confidence. Like, I don't know, Abdul, I'm just basing, and Julianne, you as well, I'm just basing what I'm about to say off of the tone of your voices. It sounds like you're now a bit more confident about what the values of conditional and biconditional are, arrow and two-way arrow are. And you just keep working with them and living with them, and it'll get more and more familiar and comfortable to you.
That's right.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, so Berman earlier had said, "Hey, what did you say about extra credit?" If I missed you earlier, or you missed the discussion earlier, at the outset of class, I was going through some housekeeping items, and so let me just very quickly go back over that with you. So first, I want to. Okay, so a couple of things. There are a couple of things to chat about. So one is, if you go to our homepage and you scroll on down to the handouts and retest link, you'll notice that I've created retests for exam 1 and exam 2. Now, I don't know if I succeeded in making the points possible for the retest equivalent to the original. I think I did. And the retests don't have any of that additional extra credit stuff. So that's what the equivalent should be between the two, namely what the original exam was sans extra credit, right? So those are available to you. There's no harm in retesting because I take your top score. It doesn't matter which is your top score. So if you just want to take an exam as practice, you already like your score, it can't hurt you to do it. Speaking of extra credit, I finally worked the extra credit calculations for exam 2, but I need you to double check that I did it right for you. I don't want to have miscalculated. I still need to go back into a couple of quizzes, and I think also exam 1 where there was some extra credit as well. And make sure that I calculate those out for you. Unfortunately, given the way Canvas is set up, you can't just click a button and say this is extra credit and then have Canvas treat it as extra credit in terms of the algorithm. So you got to do it manually. So I'm very slow on that, and I apologize. So that's the extra credit there. Is there going to be more extra credit? Yes, but I want to wait a little bit until we're really kind of comfortable with how we've been working on the material, what we feel like we know, what we feel like we need more help with. Okay, so I'll leave Berman in charge of yelling at me if I haven't got extra credit going for you fast enough. And then a couple of other things. Julianne was kind enough to say, I got through practice from the text. I want more. So we've got more practice here if you want it. And I will also make more practice for the new material. What I haven't had a chance to do is work the practice keys, especially so that I've got it in a Word document that I've typed, because the notation is not the same as what I've been using, and I figured it'd be faster just to write it. If you have any trouble reading my writing, you know what to do. Just give me a shout. But there's extra practice and then keys to go with them. If you want more still, don't be shy, right? The more practice you do, the better things get. And then, so that I think that was it for the stuff that I wanted to mention.
For the retest for the exam,
Yeah.
there are 51 attempts, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's like 3 hours. Here's what I did, Berman, is I basically took the same format as the original and I made adjustments, right? I also am keeping the practice, because I think some people said they liked it, of giving you textbook references so you can look stuff up if you want to. Okay. But yeah, so basically the idea is that it should look formatting wise, style wise, like what you're already used to. Okay. If, of course, you have any questions or you think there's some sort of, wonkiness going on, don't be shy about telling me. Okay? So, that said, questions, problems, confusion. Is there anything you're dying to talk about? And also, don't forget, by the way, I mean, I know Julianne knows this, and I'm really glad, Julianne, that you will say, hey, I want to chat, I want to talk. But I hope everybody knows that if you want to chat, I'm around. You don't have to come into office hours if, for example, you don't want to, or more importantly, perhaps you can't make an office hour, but you really want to chat about the material. Please don't be shy. Say, hey, Mia, I want to talk. Can't make it to office hours. We'll set up another time to meet. Okay, I'm around. I'm here to help. Okay, so is there anything that you're dying to talk about? So far, so good. Okay. Also, please, please, please let me know what's working for you. Arguably, more importantly, but certainly just as importantly, let me know what's not working for you. Because if there's something I can do to change that to make it better, I will. But because we've moved over to this new text that we think is really quite good. It's not like I've been working with it for a long time such that I know how people respond to it. So if there's something that's not working well for you, I want to know, but also I want to know if things are working well because I can, capitalize on that. Okay. All right. See you next week, if not before.